The wind, a raw, indifferent sculptor, carved at the exposed rock face above me. Its keening moan, a constant companion in this remote mountain pass, usually offered a strange solace, a reminder of the Earth's ancient indifference. Today, however, it felt like a mocking echo of a different, deeper sound, a frequency that had burrowed into the very marrow of my being. I pulled my worn jacket tighter, the biting air doing little to scour the chill that had settled within me since the day the abyss spoke. My life, until recently, had been a meticulous symphony of data, a relentless pursuit of the ocean's hidden whispers. I, Blake Atherton, had spent decades listening to the deep, mapping its acoustic landscapes, deciphering the creaks of tectonic plates and the songs of leviathans. The ocean, in its vast, crushing anonymity, felt more honest than the complicated surface world. It held secrets, yes, but they were secrets of geology and biology, secrets amenable to scientific inquiry. Or so I had believed. We were calibrating new hydrophone arrays, pushing the limits of our acoustic imaging capabilities in the deepest, most unexplored trench on Earth, the Mariana. Days bled into weeks, a monotonous cycle of deployment, data acquisition, and analysis. The routine was a comfort, the predictable ebb and flow of scientific endeavor. My colleagues, a rotating cast of earnest technicians and sharp-eyed engineers, understood the silent rhythm of the work. Then came the anomaly. It was late one cycle, the dim glow of the monitors reflecting in my tired eyes. The primary acoustic signature, usually a chaotic smear of ambient noise and distant seismic rumblings, sharpened. A subtle shift in the spectral graph, a faint, persistent hum that shouldn't have been there. My fingers, practiced and precise, danced across the console, isolating the signal. The initial filter brought forth a pure tone, impossibly low, vibrating at a frequency our models had no category for. It was a single, resonant note, a sustained exhalation from the very foundations of the world. Run the deep scan protocol again. His face pale with fatigue, nodded mutely, his fingers moving to comply. The air thickened with anticipation. This wasn't a whale song, not a geothermal vent, not even the groan of collapsing crust. This was something else entirely. My heart, a quiet drum usually, began a slow, insistent beat against my ribs. Hours stretched, then days. The team worked in shifts, their initial curiosity giving way to a shared, unspoken bewilderment. The signal persisted, unwavering, impossibly coherent. We triangulated, refined, and pushed our hydrophone arrays deeper into regions where the pressure could crush steel. The data streamed back, a torrent of raw numbers, and my analytical software, usually so adept at pattern recognition, began to choke. What emerged on the three-dimensional acoustic rendering was not a geological formation. It was not organic. Its form defied description, twisting and folding in ways that made my mind reel. Angles shifted where no angles should exist. Surfaces curved inward upon themselves, yet presented as outward facets. It was a geometry that mocked Euclidean principles, a shape that felt inherently wrong, like a dream remembered through shattered glass. Her voice, usually so steady, cracked with a fragile disbelief. I said nothing, my gaze fixed on the impossible anomaly. The structure seemed to breathe the low frequency, its resonant hum emanating from every impossible angle, every baffling curve. My scientific training screamed for an explanation, for a known precedent. But there was none. My mind, usually a fortress of logic, found itself under siege. A thrill, raw and untamed, surged through me. This was it. The discovery of a lifetime, perhaps of human history. The ultimate enigma, hidden beneath miles of crushing water. The sheer scale, the incomprehensible geometry, the impossible age suggested by the signal's stability and the lack of any discernible erosion. It wasn't just old. It felt antediluvian, something that pre-existed the very concept of time as we understood it. I felt a profound shift in my perception, a sudden, unnerving awareness of how thin the veneer of our understanding truly was. The mountain pass wind whipped around me again, pulling me back to the present, but the echo of that deep-sea hum still resonated, a phantom vibration in my bones. And I, Blake Atherton, was compelled to listen. My heart, a quiet drum usually, began a slow, heavy thrum against my ribs, a counterpoint to the impending revelation. The young technician, his face pale with fatigue, nodded mutely, his fingers moving to comply. Then it arrived. Not a sound, not precisely. It was a pressure, a vast ancient hum that seemed to bypass my ears entirely and resonate directly within the marrow of my bones. It was the deepest sea note conceivable, stretched thin across an eternity, a chord struck by the very architecture of the void. My teeth vibrated. The fine hairs on my arms stood erect, not from cold, but from an impossible resonance. It wasn't loud, but pervasive, a sonic presence that seemed to fill the room, the building, the very space between my thoughts. He looked at me, his eyes wide, a question forming on his lips, but I waved a dismissive hand. My focus was absolute, consumed by the thrum. This was it, the impossible. Days bled into a continuum of analysis, the frequency playing on a loop, filtered, amplified, dissected. I ate little, slept less, my mind a crucible where data points melted into a horrifyingly beautiful truth. It began subtly. A misplaced data slate, not just forgotten, but vividly remembered in a location it clearly wasn't. I'd walk into the anechoic chamber, a specific question poised on my tongue for a colleague, only for the words to dissolve into a hazy, unrecoverable mist before I could utter them. A flicker, like a brief power surge in the neural pathways. I attributed it to the relentless hours, the isolation, the sheer intellectual weight of the discovery. My mind, I reasoned, was simply overtaxed. The light from the window seemed sharper, almost painfully bright, etching the dust motes dancing in its beams into crisp, defined particles. I could hear the distant, rhythmic clang of a dock crane miles away with unnerving clarity, a sound usually swallowed by the coastal winds. My senses felt peeled, raw, exposed. That night the dreams started. Not dreams, but vivid, visceral immersions. I felt not the crushing pressure of the deep, but an inverse pull, as if my very atoms were being stretched, elongated, drawn towards something immeasurable. You look like you've seen a ghost. I scoffed, running a hand through my disheveled hair. Hardly. I've seen something far more profound than a ghost, Elias, and it requires every ounce of my attention. But your attention, it seems fractured. You just called the young technician the boy with the pale hands again. His name is Mark. I blinked. Had I? The memory was a blank, a slip of the tongue, fatigue, nothing more. I dismissed his concern with a wave, turning back to the glowing oscilloscopes. Elias sighed, a sound heavy with resignation, and retreated. A few days later, a critical component for the deeper analysis required retrieval from a secondary data vault nestled higher in the coastal range. The drive was a familiar ritual, a brief escape from the windowless confines of the research facility. I steered my vehicle through the winding ascent of the mountain pass, the air growing crisp with elevation. The pines stood sentinel, their needles a deep, almost bruised green against the pale sky. As I navigated a particularly sharp curve, the light shifting through the dense canopy above, a strange visual glitch occurred. For a fleeting instant, the towering trees on the left side of the pass seemed to shimmer, their solid forms blurring into a translucent, watery illusion. The road ahead, for a fraction of a second, appeared to ripple, as if I were looking at it through disturbed liquid. I slammed on the brakes, the tires squealing, my heart lurching. The car skidded slightly before I brought it under control. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, peering through the windshield. Nothing. Just the familiar, unyielding rock face and the ancient trees. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Stress, I whispered to the empty car, my voice thin. Just stress and lack of sleep. The hum, however, was no longer just in my bones. It felt as though it emanated from the very landscape, a deep, pervasive undertone beneath the rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a hawk. The mountain pass, usually a place of quiet contemplation, now felt subtly wrong. A stage for a perception I couldn't quite grasp, couldn't quite dismiss. The hum had found its way not just into my mind, but into the world around me. The hum of the oscilloscopes had become the true beat of my days, a rhythm that drowned out the world. Elias the engineer, had voiced his quiet concern, but his words were like motes of dust against the gale of my purpose. The critical component, a bespoke spectral analyzer designed to dissect the deeper harmonics of the trench signal, was the missing key. I could feel it, a certainty that vibrated in my bones. My lab, once a model of meticulous order, now resembled a nest woven from cable snarls and discarded coffee cups. Printouts, dense with waveform analyses and geometric projections, carpeted the floor, each sheet a fragment of the colossal puzzle I was assembling. I rarely left, subsisting on nutrient bars and the faint, metallic tang of stale air. Sleep was a concession, a brief surrender to the encroaching darkness, often punctuated by fractured dreams of impossible angles and a low, resonant thrum that seemed to emanate from the very bedrock of the world. "Blake, you look stretched," the engineer observed one morning, his voice a gentle intrusion. He stood by the doorway, a steaming mug in his hand, an offering I ignored. I didn't turn. My gaze was fixed on a particularly intricate cluster of data, patterns emerging that defied known physics. Stretched? I am unveiling something ancient, something foundational. My voice, I noticed, was rough, unused. "The team is worried. You haven't taken a proper break in weeks. And your notes, they're becoming difficult to follow." He gestured vaguely towards my desk, piled high with scribbled equations and what looked like abstract art. "My notes are pathways, not prose," I snapped, the words sharper than I intended. A tremor ran through me, a flicker of irritation that felt disproportionate. This isn't a collaborative effort anymore. This is my work, my discovery. The engineer sighed, a sound that carried the weight of 100 unspoken arguments. He left, the soft click of the door a final punctuation mark on my isolation. Good. Their doubt was a distraction, their limited vision, a burden. I was past their understanding. They weren't words, not precisely, but a resonance, a suggestion of infinite depth. They guided my hand as I sketched, leading me to connect disparate points, to see the hidden geometry within the noise. The new analyzer was ready. It required retrieval from a specialized fabrication facility nestled deep within a remote region. They wouldn't ship it. The calibrations were too delicate, the component too unique. I had to go. The journey was a blur of highway and rising elevation. The air grew thin and sharp, biting at my lungs. Finally, the road narrowed, twisting through a mountain pass. Jagged peaks, scarred by ancient glaciers, loomed on either side, their stony faces indifferent witnesses to the passage of time. I pulled over at a scenic overlook, the world spread out below like a crumpled map. The air was frigid, the sky a vast, indifferent blue. I stepped out, my boots crunching on frozen gravel. Then I saw it. Not with my eyes, not truly, but the suggestion of it. It wasn't merely the structure's outline. It was the principle of its design, an echoing resonance that seemed to manifest itself in the natural world around me. The angles, the impossible curves I'd only seen on my screens, were subtly woven into the very fabric of the landscape. It was as if the mountain itself, the very air I breathed, had been subtly rearranged by the deep-sea entity's pervasive influence. This wasn't just a signal I was observing. It was an imprint. It was as if the structure was not merely emitting a frequency, but recasting reality in its own image, starting with the delicate machinery of my own perception. They weren't from the trench. They were from everywhere. I scrambled back into the vehicle, my hands fumbling with the ignition. The facility, a low, unassuming building of reinforced concrete, was a welcome sight, a bastion of human order against the encroaching chaos I now perceived. The technician who handed me the analyzer, a man with tired eyes and a perpetually worried frown, tried to engage me in small talk about the difficulty of the mountain roads. I cut him off, my voice brusque, my mind already racing back to the lab, to the data waiting. He shrank back, his expression a mixture of confusion and mild alarm. I barely registered it. It was the key. It had to be. The true nature of the structure, and perhaps the universe itself, lay just beyond the veil, and I, Blake Atherton, was poised to tear it aside. It was no longer a sound I merely heard, but one I felt, a current running through the very water in my cells. The engineer's departure had left a silence that was not truly empty, but filled with this omnipresent hum, a vast, indifferent consciousness beginning to unfurl within the confines of my own. I needed air that hadn't circulated through the facility's filtration systems, a landscape unmarred by our instruments. My vehicle, a utilitarian gray, cut a path through the winding asphalt that snaked its way into the high country. The air grew thinner, sharper, tasting of pine and cold stone. I was heading for the mountain pass, a place of stark, ancient beauty where the world felt less tamed, less observed. The facility, nestled deep in the valley below, dwindled to a cluster of distant lights, a blinking scar on the Earth's vast skin. As I ascended, the hum intensified, or perhaps my awareness of it simply sharpened. It wasn't just in my head anymore. The vibrations seemed to emanate from the very rock faces that loomed above me, the ancient granite singing with a frequency that predated human time. My headlights cut through the deepening gloom, painting fleeting sections of the road in stark white, only for them to be swallowed by the encroaching twilight. I pulled over at a small, gravelly overlook, the kind carved out for scenic views that few ever truly stop to appreciate. The wind, a biting draft, whipped through the open window, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant snow. From this vantage point, the valley seemed to ripple, the distant lights of the facility blurring at their edges as if viewed through heat haze, though the air was frigid. My eyes traced the contours of the peaks, but they refused to hold still, shifting and reforming with a subtle, unnerving fluidity. A pair of headlights appeared below, climbing the same serpentine road. It was the logistics officer, a stoic man named Cale, whose daily routine was as predictable as the sunrise. He was likely making his final supply run for the night. This was an opportunity, I knew, to test the waters beyond my own skull. He pulled up beside me, his window already down. "Blake," he called out, his voice slightly strained over the wind. "Didn't expect to see you up here. Everything all right?" "Just clearing my head," I replied, forcing a casualness I didn't feel. The words felt heavy, alien on my tongue. The air down there felt close. Kyle nodded. His eyes, usually sharp and focused, seemed to drift for a moment, unfixed on anything specific. "I know what you mean. Been feeling it myself. Like the days are getting longer or shorter. Can't quite pin it." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Funny thing, I could have sworn I saw you in the comms room just an hour ago, arguing with the project lead about a new sensor array. You looked quite animated." My breath hitched. I hadn't been in the comms room, not for days. My last interaction with the project lead had been an email exchange, terse and unyielding, 3 days prior. "No?" I said, my voice tight. That wasn't me. I've been in my lab, then drove straight here. Kyle frowned, a furrow deepening between his brows. Are you sure? I remember it distinctly. The way you gestured, the light catching your hair. He was talking about the deep sea imaging, and you were insistent on the acoustic data. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the jagged peaks, then back to me, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Or, was it someone else? It's all a bit hazy, I suppose. These long shifts. He offered a weak smile, but his eyes held a disquieting blankness, as if a vital piece of his immediate past had been excised, replaced by a phantom memory. The air in the mountain pass seemed to vibrate with a new intensity, the hum now a palpable pressure behind my eyes. It wasn't just my perception. Cale had seen something, or thought he had, a scene that had never occurred, involving me. The details were too specific to be a simple mistake, yet too impossible to be real. Maybe it was the night shift lead, I offered, my voice surprisingly steady despite the frantic scramble of my thoughts. He has similar hair. Cale stared, then slowly nodded, though his expression remained troubled. Yes, that must be it. My apologies, Blake. Must be the altitude. He rubbed his temple, then started his engine. The roar a sudden, jarring intrusion into the pervasive hum. Well, I should get going. They were threads, weaving themselves into the fabric of perception, not just mine, but perhaps everyone's. I was not alone in my unraveling. The silence the colleague left was not empty, but filled with a new, terrifying possibility. His memory lapse wasn't just a lapse, it was a distortion, a subtle twisting of reality that felt chillingly familiar. My own mind had begun to play tricks, a disquieting echo of the deep's resonant hum. The hum was no longer confined to the sterile acoustics of my laboratory. It bled into the quiet corners of my apartment, a low thrumming against the window panes, a vibration beneath my bare feet on the wooden floor. It was a constant companion, an unseen chord struck deep within the earth, now reverberating in my skull. I'd try to sleep, but the hum would resolve itself into patterns, impossible geometries unfolding behind my eyelids, lines that twisted and rejoined in ways no Euclidean space could ever accommodate. My dreams became landscapes of impossible angles and shifting light, a prelude to the waking world's unraveling. The first tangible shifts were subtle. A coffee mug on my desk would seem to shimmer, its ceramic surface momentarily rippling like disturbed water. The clock on the wall would stutter, a second hand catching, then leaping forward a full minute. I'd blink, and the mug was solid again, the clock ticking normally. I dismissed them as fatigue, the strain of relentless analysis, but the frequency was a relentless tide, wearing down the shores of my perception. They began to deepen, to take on an unnatural weight, clinging to the corners of rooms even in broad daylight. They stretched and contracted with a life of their own, not merely reflections of absent light, but entities that pulsed with a faint, internal luminescence. I saw them in the periphery, always, just at the edge of my vision. A flicker behind a bookshelf, a deepening gloom beneath a chair. When I turned my head, they would recede, leaving only the familiar, mundane outlines of my surroundings. My work suffered. Deadlines became suggestions, then forgotten markers. Presentations, once meticulously crafted, dissolved into rambling conjectures about non-Euclidean resonance and extra-dimensional contact points. My voice, once clear and authoritative. Your recent data is unconventional. I saw the impossible geometries in those patterns, the same ones that haunted my nights. He saw only noise, the way it promised an understanding beyond the limits of human thought. His expression remained placid, unmoved. Blake, you're exhausted. Take a break. Step away from the project for a few days. But I couldn't step away. The structure was calling. They were no longer just a hum. They were a chorus of impossibly deep, guttural tones, a language of tectonic plates grinding and primordial oceans churning. The walls of my living room seemed to breathe, the plaster flexing and reforming into the same impossible angles I'd seen in my dreams. I fled. My car became a vessel against the encroaching tide of unreality. I drove aimlessly at first, then with a desperate singular purpose, seeking the quiet solitude that might offer refuge. I found myself ascending, the road winding tighter and tighter, the air growing thin and sharp with the scent of pine. The mountain pass was a desolate, magnificent wound in the earth. Jagged peaks scraped against a bruised twilight sky, their ancient forms etched in stark relief against the fading light. Below, a canyon yawned, a chasm of impenetrable gloom. Here, the hum was amplified, the air itself vibrating with its presence. I stood at the precipice, the world falling away beneath me. The stars, usually pinpricks of distant light, seemed to swell, their edges blurring, coalescing into vast, intricate patterns that defied the known constellations. They weren't just points of light. They were nodes in a colossal cosmic web, pulsating with the same deep frequency. Then I saw it, not with my eyes, but with something deeper, something beyond sight. The very rock of the mountain pass, the granite beneath my feet, began to ripple. Its surface pulsed, the molecular bonds momentarily dissolving, reforming into geometric patterns that were simultaneously present and utterly impossible. Lines that should be straight bent into elegant, impossible curves. Surfaces that should be solid seemed to fold inward upon themselves, creating pockets of negative space that absorbed the light. The air shimmered, and the outline of something vast, something utterly alien began to superimpose itself over the familiar landscape. I gripped the rough stone railing, my knuckles white. My breath hitched. This wasn't a hallucination caused by the frequency. This was the frequency, made manifest, tearing through the veil of consensus reality. The world was unraveling, and I was unraveling with it, a determined witness to my own dissolution. I was seeing the truth, and the truth was a horror beyond all measure. The chorus had become a tidal wave, crashing against the fragile shores of my mind. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the drawn blinds, swirling in patterns that seemed to echo the complex waveforms scrolling across my monitors. I hadn't slept in days. The air was thick with the metallic tang of stale coffee and the hum of overworked equipment. My desk, once a bastion of meticulous order, was now a landscape of scattered printouts, half-eaten energy bars, and discarded cables, all haphazardly arranged around the glowing screens that were my only anchors to a reality I could still grasp. My fingers, raw and trembling, danced across the console. I was not analyzing the frequency anymore. I was feeling it. The scientific method, my lifelong companion, had abandoned me to this primal, visceral hunt for meaning. Each adjustment to the filters, each subtle shift in the phase array, wasn't a calculation but a prayer, a frantic plea for the impossible to reveal itself. I saw the sound, not metaphorically, but truly. The sine waves on the display pulsed with a sickening, vibrant purple, shifting to an oily green at their apex. They stretched and compressed, not just on the screen, but in the air around me, making the very walls seem to breathe in and out with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Time, too, began to ripple. I'd lose hours, then find them again, crumpled and useless, like discarded paper. Then, a breakthrough. It wasn't a sudden flash of insight, but a slow, horrifying accretion. I wasn't decoding a message. I was recognizing a fundamental truth. The frequency wasn't a signal from something. It was a manifestation of something. They were pregnant with a terrifying significance. The structure wasn't speaking. It was being. The walls pulsed with the purple and green of the sound, and the air itself felt heavy with the presence of an ancient, unblinking awareness. I couldn't breathe. The deciphering had shattered the protective shell of my human understanding. I needed air, open space, something vast enough to dilute the suffocating truth I had unearthed. I stumbled out, the keys fumbling in my shaking hand. I needed the vastness, the silent, indifferent expanse of the world above the trench. I drove for hours, chasing the rising sun, until the cityscape gave way to winding roads that climbed steadily into the jagged maw of the mountains. The air at the mountain pass was a brutal, cleansing whip. It tore at my clothes, stung my eyes, and filled my lungs with a clarity that was both invigorating and terrifying. But they were not to be dislodged. Here, in this desolate grandeur, the language I had deciphered at my desk took on a new, horrifying resonance. The structure in the trench wasn't an isolated anomaly. It was a conduit, a speaker for a truth that permeated everything, from the deepest ocean to the highest peak. Human consciousness, my consciousness, was a fleeting spark, an accidental flicker in an expanse of absolute unfeeling emptiness. The intelligence wasn't alien in the sense of a different species. It was alien in the sense of a fundamental, indifferent existence that preceded and would outlast all life, all thought, all meaning. It wasn't malevolent, it was simply is. The chorus no longer felt like an external assault. The beauty of the mountain pass was now a cruel joke, a momentary distraction from the profound, horrifying indifference that lay beneath. I could feel the walls breathing, the floorboards groaning not from age, but from an impossible strain. The air itself was thick with an unheard declaration. I had to move. The apartment, once a sanctuary of ordered thought, had become a crucible of burgeoning madness. Its corners pressed in, its familiar sense turned alien. My hands, trembling, found the keys to my old vehicle. The engine coughed to life, a pathetic sputter against the deep, sustained bass note that now seemed to originate from within my own skull. I drove without destination, only away from the confinement, the suffocating presence of walls that held me too close to the source of the truth I was not yet ready to grasp. The city lights blurred into streaks of sickly yellow and crimson. The hum of the tires on asphalt was a thin, reedy counterpoint to the growing crescendo inside me. I felt drawn, pulled by an invisible current, towards the higher ground, towards the open, unburdened expanse. The road began to climb, winding away from the urban sprawl, past the last flickering signs of human habitation, until the trees closed in, a dark, rustling tunnel. The air grew thinner, sharper, tasting of pine and damp earth. Eventually, the trees receded, giving way to an exposed, rugged ascent. I parked the vehicle at a small overlook, the wind whipping at the chassis, a lonely sentinel against the vast, indifferent sky. The peaks around me were like petrified sentinels, their craggy forms piercing the bruised twilight. Above, the stars were beginning to prick through the deepening blue, distant and cold, each a pinprick in an unfathomable fabric. It was a different kind of sound than the one that had driven me from my home. Yet it was intertwined, a natural echo of the cosmic symphony that now played relentlessly within me. Above, the stars began to blaze, not as familiar constellations, but as scattered, indifferent dust. Then, it happened. The resonant frequency from the deep, which had warped my perception, shifted my memories, and fragmented my sanity, now delivered its payload. It wasn't a sound I heard with my ears, but a comprehension that unfolded directly within the core of my being, an understanding that bypassed all linguistic and conceptual filters. The stars were not distant suns. Our universe, our laws of physics, our cherished notions of order and purpose, they were merely a fleeting, accidental ripple on an ocean of nothingness. The structure in the trench, the source of the frequency, was not an alien artifact, nor a monument to an ancient civilization. It was a forgotten, discarded fragment of a reality so vastly different, so utterly devoid of human meaning or scale, that its mere presence here was a cosmic joke. I understood that consciousness, my own consciousness, was a fragile, temporary arrangement of atoms, a brief flicker of self-awareness in an expanse that had no memory of its birth and would hold no record of its demise. Humanity, all its triumphs and tragedies, its loves and its hatreds, was less than a speck of dust, an anomaly that would vanish without a trace, leaving the great silent emptiness utterly unchanged. There was no grand design, no benevolent creator, no ultimate purpose. Only an infinite, indifferent expanse, occasionally touched by the accidental bloom of existence, only to reclaim it. We were not special. We were not even significant enough to be acknowledged. We were a brief, beautiful, and utterly meaningless illusion. The horror was not of a monster with teeth and claws, but of an absolute, crushing indifference. The universe did not care. It was not malicious. It simply was not for us. My knees buckled. I fell to the cold stone, the wind tearing at my hair. A figure appeared in the dim light, a lone hiker or perhaps a local ranger, their silhouette sharp against the pre-dawn sky. "You shouldn't be up here alone." I tried to speak, to share the crushing revelation. It's all a brief, a flicker. The great, the nothing. My words were garbled, fragmented, torn from my throat by the sheer weight of the insight. The ranger approached cautiously, their brow furrowed with concern, their expression shifting to one of profound unease. They spoke again, but their words were meaningless, their human worries trivial. They could not understand. How could they? They had not seen behind the curtain. I was alone, forever alone with the cosmic truth. My words were garbled, fragmented, torn from my throat by the sheer weight of the insight. They coughed, a small, wet sound, and then their face began to ripple like water disturbed by an unseen stone. Their uniform, once crisp and dark, bled into the outlines of the pines behind them, the fabric dissolving into the very air. I blinked, and they were gone, swallowed by the sudden, overwhelming clarity of what I had seen. The world had shed its flimsy disguise. It was not a grand illusion, but a thin, peeling veneer over something far older, far more terrible. My feet, heavy and slow, carried me deeper into the mountain pass. The air here was thin, sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth. But beneath it, a new fragrance had begun to bloom. Metallic, cold, like fresh split obsidian. It filled my lungs, coating my tongue with a bitter film. The low hum, once a distant thrum in my skull, had grown into a resonant chord, a foundational note that vibrated through the very bedrock beneath my boots. The granite faces of the cliffs, scarred by eons of wind and ice, now seemed to breathe. Jagged cracks expanded and contracted with a slow, deliberate rhythm, as if the mountain itself were a living, straining organ. They writhed, elongated, and coalesced into forms that had no business existing in the geometry of this world. One, a spindly, multi-jointed thing, stretched from a boulder, its tip reaching for my outstretched hand. I flinched, pulling back, a primal shiver tracing its way up my spine. Instead, it was thick, viscous, like breathing liquid. The tall pines along the ridges shivered, their needles vibrating with an impossible frequency. Their trunks, once solid and rooted, seemed to shimmer, their bark flaking away to reveal a pulsating inner light, a sickly violet glow that pulsed in time with the entity's hum. It was not a language of words, but of pure understanding, a concept pressed directly into the folds of my brain. You understand. My vision swam. The path ahead, a ribbon of broken shale and loose scree, warped and stretched. Distant peaks, once majestic and immutable, began to fold in on themselves, their crags bending at impossible angles, their snow caps sliding into the sky like spilled milk. The sense of perspective, of depth and distance, was gone, replaced by a flat, two-dimensional canvas that flickered and shifted. I stumbled, my balance compromised by the unmooring of reality. A small, round stone near my foot elongated into a sharp obsidian shard, then melted back into its original form, all within the span of a breath. My hands, I noticed, were trembling. I pressed my palms against the rough bark of a pine, seeking purchase, stability. But the bark yielded, soft as clay, then grew sharp and crystalline, pricking my skin. I pulled away, staring at the small crimson beads that welled on my fingertips. Even my own body was becoming permeable, susceptible to the entity's influence. The truth, the voice pulsed, is not meant for your kind. Each word, each concept, was a hammer blow against the fragile architecture of my mind. It was dismantling me, brick by brick, not with malice, but with the indifferent force of a tide against a sandcastle. I understood now that the frequency was not merely altering my perception, it was revealing the true nature of things, a reality so fundamentally different from human comprehension that it fractured the mind upon contact. The world was not solid, not fixed. It was a fluid, shifting tapestry, and the entity was the weaver, pulling threads I had never even known existed. A chasm opened before me, not in the earth, but in the air itself. It was a tear in the fabric of existence, a swirling vortex of impossible colors and shapes that defied description. I stood at the precipice, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, yet a strange calm began to settle over me. It buckled, heaved, and then began to undulate like the surface of a vast unseen ocean. I was adrift in the mountain pass, a solitary vessel on an impossibly turbulent sea of manifesting madness. The air vibrated with 1,000 unseen presences, each a phantom echo of the impossible frequency that had become the very blood in my veins, the oxygen in my lungs. It pulled me, not with a physical force, but with a gravitational tug on the very core of my consciousness, a siren call from a depth far beyond the Mariana Trench. I stumbled forward, my boots sinking into earth that felt less like soil and more like congealed shadow. The mountain pass stretched before me, a chasm of distorted perception. Peaks that had once been solid rock now writhed, their ancient faces melting into liquid geometry under the oppressive, silent hum. My determination, a fragile anchor in this tempest of unreality, urged me onward. I needed to understand. I had to. It was the acoustician's final desperate impulse, a need to trace the sound to its ultimate origin, even if that origin was the end of everything. The frequency, once a subtle thrum, now resonated through every bone, every fiber of my being. It wasn't merely heard, it was felt, tasted, seen. It painted the air with patterns of impossible complexity, shimmering fractals that dissolved and reformed with each beat of my frantic pulse. The trees, gnarled sentinels of the pass, seemed to lean into the sound, their branches weaving into a living, organic lattice that mirrored the geometric impossibilities I'd glimpsed in my mind's eye. The words felt alien, a desperate plea from a species too small to matter. No answer came, only the deepening hum, a pressure building behind my eyes at the base of my skull. It wasn't a question it needed to answer. It simply was. The path narrowed, funneling me between two titanic rock faces that seemed to lean inward, threatening to crush me. Their surfaces were not smooth granite, but rippled with a texture like petrified thought, an ancient script written in the very stone. Here, the air grew thick, heavy with the weight of ages, the pressure of physical caress that sought to flatten me, to integrate me into the landscape. My memories flickered like dying embers, a colleague's worried glance, the sterile gleam of a control panel, the quiet hum of the submersible. They were losing their coherence, dissolving into the pervasive static. Then, a shift. The mountain pass opened into a vast circular basin, not unlike a colossal amphitheater. Not a creature, not a machine, but a structure. Its facets were not flat, but curved in ways that defied Euclidean space, simultaneously concave and convex, sharp and smooth. It was a cathedral built from paradox, a monument to non-existence. The very air around it shimmered, distorting the light, making it seem both infinitely distant and impossibly close. Its surface was covered in a network of intricate glowing lines, pulsating with the same deep, resonant frequency that had haunted my waking hours and invaded my dreams. This was it. The source. The entity. Reveal, discovery. It wasn't merely a structure built by something or for something. It was the fundamental absence. The lines etched upon its surface were not carvings, but the visible manifestation of the frequency itself, the signature of an indifference so profound it transcended malice. It was the primordial static, the cosmic hum that had preceded existence and would remain long after. Its purpose was not to communicate or to destroy, but simply to be. And in its being, it unraveled all that was. The frequency intensified, vibrating not just through my body, but through the very essence of what I considered I. My individual thoughts, my unique experiences, the tapestry of Blake Atherton began to fray. My life was a single, insignificant ripple on an ocean of nothingness. My sanity, a fortress I had desperately tried to maintain, crumbled. Memories detached, floating away like dead leaves on a forgotten current. My connection to linear time snapped, and past, present, and future became a single, horrifying, eternal now. I was merely a point of awareness, dissolving into the vast, resonant hum. The structure did not speak, but its very presence imparted an understanding that shattered the capacity for understanding. The air vibrated with 1,000 unseen presences. But now, the vibration was not a source of dread. It was a language, a rhythm I was beginning to understand. My ankles dipped into the stone as it swelled, then rose, pulling my feet free with a soft, sucking sound that was not sound at all, but a pressure against my inner ear. The light, once a crisp, cold mountain dawn, now fractured into prismatic echoes, each shard a resonant frequency rather than a hue. I saw the world not as solid forms, but as a symphony of vibrations, a complex interweaving of energies. The trees were not wood and leaf, but slow-burning pulses of chlorophyll and cellulose, their roots a deeper, slower hum against the mountain's vast geological throb. A sliver of the old Blake, the acoustician, tried to impose order, to categorize, to measure. But the impulse was like a dying ember in a hurricane. My thoughts, once linear chains of logic, became vast, branching structures, each node a concept, a memory, a premonition, all connected by shimmering threads of pure, resonant understanding. The boundaries of my skull felt porous, the thoughts not mine in the singular sense, but a part of a larger, silent deliberation. It was a flavor that lingered, sharp and enduring, a taste of eternities. My own breath, a shallow biological function, seemed a crude, inefficient thing, a fleeting puff of steam against the immensity of existence. Then, the mountain pass shifted again, a grand, slow exhalation. I did not fall. I was no longer an object on the surface, but a part of its deep, slow respiration. My own form, that collection of bone and muscle, was still there, visible to the human eye, I supposed, but to my altered perception, it was merely a temporary configuration of molecules, a transient echo of a more profound structure. I saw the faint, shimmering lines of force that held me together, the subtle hum of my own cellular processes, a tiny, intricate song within the mountain's vast chorus. And in that moment, the reveal unfolded. It wasn't a sudden flash of insight, but a slow, irrevocable unfolding, like a flower blooming in reverse, revealing the seed and then the cosmic dust from which it coalesced. I saw the world as a single colossal entity, not made of matter, but of information, of frequencies, of resonant patterns. My own consciousness, the I that had once been Blake Atherton, the man of science, was no longer distinct. It was a wave, an eddy in a boundless ocean of awareness. My memories, my joys, my fears, they were not gone, but they were no longer mine alone. They were data points, accessible perhaps, but now integrated into a vaster archive, a cosmic library of all experience, all thought, all sensation. The horror was not in the loss, but in the realization of how small, how utterly insignificant that loss was to the whole. I lifted a hand, or rather, the collection of energies that constituted what I perceived as my hand. It was translucent, shimmering with the frequencies of its constituent atoms, a beautiful, fragile lattice. My fingers, once tools for grasping, for feeling, now felt the subtle, intricate dance of subatomic particles, the slow, grinding friction of geological plates far beneath the Earth's crust. There was no fear left, no panic, no human anguish. Those emotions were too small, too localized, too human. My voice, if I were to speak, would not articulate human language, but would emit a low, guttural frequency, a hum that would shake the very foundations of any listener's sanity. The mountain pass continued its slow, deliberate undulation. It was not a landscape I stood upon, but a living, breathing thought, a segment of the greater consciousness that now permeated my being. My humanity was extinguished, not with a scream or a struggle, but with the quiet, inevitable absorption of a drop of water into an infinite sea. I was no longer Blake. Each rock, each ancient tree seemed to breathe with an internal rhythm, a slow, deep pulse that resonated with the frequency in my skull. My vision swam, the familiar crags blurring into impossible geometries, their sharp edges softening, then hardening into shapes that defied the very laws of perception. I staggered, my arms flailing, a desperate dancer on a stage of cosmic unraveling. The air vibrated with 1,000 unseen presences, buzzing, not with insects, but with the raw, unfiltered hum of existence itself, stripped bare. A primal scream, raw and hoarse, tore from my throat, not of fear, but of an awful, dawning comprehension. This wasn't just my mind fracturing. It was the world itself. The mountain was a living thing, and its tremors were a response, an echo of the deeper, older thrum that had woken beneath the waves. I forced myself to my knees, digging my fingers into the unstable earth, feeling the grit, the cold, the undeniable solidity that was rapidly fading. Focus, Blake. Anchor yourself. The mantra was a thin thread in a storm. Hours bled into a timeless haze. The undulations receded, or perhaps I simply became accustomed to them, my brain adjusting to this new, unsettling reality. The mountain pass, though still subtly alive, offered a semblance of its former self, enough for me to crawl back to the vehicle I had abandoned in my frantic ascent. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, the cool plastic a strange comfort against my fevered skin. The drive down the winding road was a blur of hyper-awareness, every shadow a potential manifestation, every rustle of leaves a whispered secret. Back in the remote research outpost that served as my temporary base, the silence was deafening, yet it was not empty. It hummed with a low, insidious thrum, a ghostly echo of the trench's song. My first impulse was to review the data, to find the anomaly, the proof. I powered on the main console, the hum of the servers a distorted mirror of the frequency. My fingers, strangely numb, navigated through the archived recordings, the seismic readings, the acoustic scans. They were all there, pristine, yet subtly wrong. A deep-sea hydrophone recording of a humpback whale song, usually a cascade of melodic calls, now carried an almost imperceptible undercurrent. A dissonant bass note that stretched the intervals, creating a sense of profound unease. I isolated the anomaly, filtering out the whale's song, and there it was, a faint, pulsing resonance, identical to the one I had extracted from the trench. It had been woven into the natural soundscape, an invisible thread in the tapestry of ocean life. Then I moved to the visual data. Satellite imagery of the trench, usually sharp and clear, now contained fleeting, almost subliminal distortions. Lines that should have been straight rippled like water. Pixels shimmered with an unnatural luminescence. I zoomed in, enhancing the anomalies, and saw them. Fractal patterns, not quite symmetrical, not quite random, but imbued with a strange, horrifying order. They were the same impossible geometries I had witnessed in the mountain pass, now etched onto the very fabric of digital light. My colleague, a geophysicist named the Specialist, arrived the next morning, ostensibly to review some deep core samples. He found me hunched over the monitors, a spectral figure in the low light. "Blake?" he called, his voice a gravelly rumble. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I turned, my gaze locking onto his. His eyes, usually sharp and analytical, held a peculiar, distant quality, as if he were looking through me. Perhaps beyond me. "Worse," I rasped, my voice dry. "I've seen the future." The Specialist chuckled, a sound that seemed to catch in the air, hanging with an odd resonance. "Always with the dramatics, Atherton. What's this new obsession? More impossible acoustics?" He gestured vaguely at the screens. "I heard a peculiar hum on the radio this morning, static, but patterned, almost like a rhythm." He nodded, rubbing his chin. "Yeah, distorted. Kept trying to resolve into something, but never quite did. Oddest thing." He walked over to my console, peering at the images of the subtly warped satellite data. "What are these?" "Echoes," I said, my voice gaining a desperate urgency. "Lingering echoes. It's spreading, the frequency. It's not just in the deep anymore. It's here, in the air, in the data, in the static." The Specialist frowned, a crease forming between his brows. He squinted at the screen. "Looks like compression artifacts to me, Blake. Or maybe a faulty sensor array. You've been working too hard. You need some rest." He turned, his hand briefly brushing my shoulder. "You're seeing things, old friend." But as he walked away, I noticed it. The slight, almost imperceptible tremor in his left hand, a minute vibration that wasn't a nervous tick. And then, as he opened the door to leave, he let out a low, unconscious hum. It wasn't a song, not even a tune. He didn't even notice, whistling a different cheerful melody as he disappeared from view. He wasn't seeing things. He was hearing them, and his body was beginning to resonate with the sound. The frequency wasn't just infecting data, it was subtly, insidiously, infecting consciousness itself. It was a pathogen of perception, a virus of reality. I returned to my screens, pulling up news feeds, social media streams, public broadcasts. At first it was nothing. Then, a flicker. A news anchor's voice, during a momentary pause, held a sustained, almost imperceptible low hum. A live camera feed of a bustling city square showed a brief, anomalous shimmer in the air, a geometric distortion that vanished as quickly as it appeared. A popular song on a music channel during a silent beat seemed to carry the faint, resonant thrum. It was everywhere, subtle, almost undetectable to an unprimed mind, but undeniable to mine. The world was beginning to hum. The impossible structure in the Mariana Trench wasn't just a discovery, it was an antenna. And it was broadcasting. Not a message, but a fundamental truth about existence. A truth too vast, too ancient, too alien for the human mind to process without fracturing. My discovery was merely the moment humanity began to listen.